have generate return when there's extreme moves in the market, or some people call it crisis alpha strategy, because it only generate alpha when there's a crisis, which is essentially an extreme event, extreme movement in the market. And finally, some people call it convex strategy, because if you think of a convex strategy like a U-shaped strategy, the equity in that strategy will sharply go up as you move further from the mean. Whereas if the prices will remain close to the mean, it's very flat. You don't generate much return, but the return that they generate sharply accelerate as you go farther from the mean. That's what people call the convex strategy, as opposed to concave strategy, where when market price move away from the equilibrium, you suffer big loss. That typically is what happened when you're short option, right? If you're short options, you have a concave strategy because ideally the price doesn't move and your option expire worthless. But if the market moves significantly, you'll be deeply in the money, and your position can generate unlimited losses. So long fall strategy is the opposite of the kind of strategy that many option traders favor, which is shorting volatility.
How do you go ahead and backtest your models to build confidence?
Well, there are many standard backtest platform out there, but generally speaking, we would just backtest it using standard programming language, whether it's Python, R, or MATLAB, or even C#, C++, Rust, whatever programming language that you're comfortable with. And generally speaking, there are two ways of backtesting. One is using one of those so-called REPL language, such as Python, MATLAB, and R. You backtest using an entire array at the same time. So essentially, you have an array containing all the prices, and you generate trades on all the price, all the days simultaneously, and backtest it using in an array-oriented way. It's very efficient, it's very simple, but it's also very much prone to look-ahead bias. The other way is more traditional loop-based backtest, where you feed the trading logic one bar at a time and generate signal, and then compute a return for the next day. That looks very old-fashioned, very inefficient. It's certainly not an array-driven approach, but it eliminates the possibility of look-ahead bias, or minimize it at least. And so these are the general two methods of backtesting, can be implemented in language. And the key, however, to any backtest is to avoid look-ahead bias. If you, the more complicated the strategy, particularly if it's a machine learning based strategy, the more likely you will insert look-ahead bias, and the result will look wonderful. But it is actually not replicable in live trading. And that's another consideration in backtesting, is that one really should not be using backtest as a way to discover a new strategy, because if that's the case, you will always eventually find a new strategy just by backtesting enough strategies. One should use backtest. I'm from a science background, and the way physicists do and the way scientists do is that they don't just randomly perform 1 million experiments and hope that some interesting phenomenon they will encounter, right? What they do is that they have a theory of how the universe works, and then use an experiment to either confirm or reject that theory. So you typically have to perform just a few experiments to confirm or reject that hypothesis or that theory. Similarly, in finance, the backtest can be thought of as an experiment on historical data, right? You can't perform an experiment like in physics where you change the condition of the market. You can't really change the condition of the market. All you do is to existing historical prices. But nevertheless, that backtest can be used to reject or confirm a particular theory. For example, you believe that every time a earning announcement is such that if it is exceed the expected earnings by 5%, the market is going to go up, overnight. You should get in in the after-hour market, right? So let's say that's a hypothesis. That's a theory that you have. Well, it's easy to confirm or reject that. But if you don't have that theory, you would have to try maybe 100 different entry and exit threshold in the based on an earning event. And eventually one of them will work. But the fact that it worked historically doesn't mean that it will work in the future, because this is really